Even though Bernie Sanders is busy running for president, he decided to go to Washington recently to attend a budget hearing where Senate Republicans decided to propose their budget plan. Now, this budget plan is incredibly detrimental to American society. And Bernie Sanders was the only senator at this budget hearing to provide a very detailed, comprehensive discussion and analysis as to why this budget plan is so detrimental. Now, this speech is 10 minutes long, and I understand that's a long time, but I highly encourage all of my viewers to watch this whole 10-minute speech. You will know exactly who Bernie Sanders is by watching this. So take a look.
And remind them that there is no penalty for yielding back time or submitting statements for the record. Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And let me begin by thanking you for doing what no other previous Budget Committee chairman has done. For the second time in a row, you and your staff have released your budget resolution 5 days prior to our markup. That's kind of unprecedented. I thank you and I appreciate that very much. But, Mr. Chairman, that is the end of my compliments. The sad truth is that the budget that you released on Friday and the Trump budget that was released a couple of weeks ago would be an absolute disaster for the American people. What is remarkable about the Senate Republican budget, as well as President Trump's budget, is that it does exactly the opposite of what the American people want. It really is quite amazing. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when the three wealthiest families in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of American society, when the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92% of American society, when 46% of all new income is going to the top 1%, the American people want a budget whose priorities reflect the needs of working families and not just the people on top. But unfortunately, what this budget is about is a budget that benefits the wealthy at the expense of ordinary Americans. This, in fact, is a budget that moves our country rapidly in the direction of oligarchy. It constitutes a massive transfer of wealth from working families to the billionaire class. It is the Robin Hood principle in reverse. It takes from those in need and gives to the people on top who need it least. Mr. Chairman, I frankly, and I mean this sincerely, I do not understand why Republicans seem to have such a hatred toward providing health care to the American people. Today in America, as we all know, 34 million Americans have no health insurance. Even more are underinsured with high deductibles and high copayments, and 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the prescription drugs their doctors prescribe. There are estimates that over 30,000 of our fellow Americans die every single year because they don't get to a doctor when they should as a result of not having any health insurance. We are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right. Given that reality, why in God's name would Senate Republicans want to do exactly the same thing as President Trump wants to do, which is to repeal the Affordable Care Act, throw 32 million Americans off of the health insurance they currently have, take away health insurance coverage from Americans 26 years of age and younger who are on their parents' health insurance plan, end the subsidies for low and moderate income Americans who are on health insurance exchanges, substantially increase health insurance premiums for older workers, and raise prescription drugs for senior citizens. Why would you want to do that? Why do you want to cause so much pain for the American people? I honestly do not get it. Further, and importantly, when Republicans proposed to end the Affordable Care Act, repeal the Affordable Care Act. They are eliminating protections for pre-existing conditions. That means that if somebody today has diabetes, cancer, heart illness, asthma, and tries to get private health insurance, what the Republicans are proposing will either greatly increase the premiums that that individual has to pay or literally make it impossible for that person to get any health insurance. You tell me, and I want you to think about it, how much would a private health insurance company charge a 55-year-old man or woman in the midst of cancer treatment, which involves chemotherapy and radiation? And you tell me, Mr. Chairman, how many working-class families will simply not be able to pay that cost? And let us be honest and brutally honest. And how many people will die as a result? Somebody has cancer, they're a working-class person, they get all kinds of expensive treatment, and they go into an insurance company. Do you think, does anybody here think, that that person will be able to afford that insurance? Mr. Chairman, over and over again during his campaign for president, Donald Trump promised the American people that he would not cut Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. On May 7th, 2015, Trump tweeted, and I quote, "I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid." That's what Trump said during his campaign. Unfortunately, he lied, as he often does. His budget proposes a $1.5 trillion cut to Medicaid, $845 billion cut to Medicare, and a $25 billion cut to Social Security over a 10-year period. The Republican Senate budget that we're looking at today does not go as far as Trump did in his disastrous budget, and I acknowledge that. But it would also cause incalculable harm to tens of millions of Americans. Like Trump, the Republicans eliminate the Affordable Care Act with all of the horrible ramifications that that would bring about. In addition, they would cut Medicaid by $223 billion over 5 years. Trump was a 10-year budget. This is a 5-year budget. They would cut Medicare by $77 billion over the next 5 years. In America today, Medicaid, let us not forget, pays for more than 2/3 of all of the nursing home care in our country. What happens to seniors with Alzheimer's and other serious illnesses who have their nursing home coverage paid for by Medicaid if we are to make disastrous cuts to that program? And it's not just seniors. Today, Medicaid covers millions of children with special needs. We are the only major country not to guarantee health care to all, and this budget would throw tens of thousands of children with special needs off the health insurance they have. Further, just like Trump's budget, the Republican Senate budget will make it harder for our children to get a decent education, harder to protect the air that we breathe and the water that we drink, and harder for the elderly to live out their retirement years with dignity and respect. If you are a working class student trying to figure out how you could possibly afford college, this budget is going to make it much harder. If you are a low-income pregnant woman, you may no longer receive the nutrition assistance that you and your newborn baby need because the Republican budget would make about $4.6 billion in cuts to the Women, Infants, and Children program. If you are a lower-income senior citizen, you may no longer be able to keep your home warm because this budget calls for over $3 billion cuts to the LIHEAP program. Further, at a time when millions of Americans are paying 40 or 50% of their limited income for affordable housing, this budget eliminates housing assistance for nearly 700,000 families by making a $36 billion cut to the Section 8 rental assistance program. At a time when the cost of child care has skyrocketed, the Republican budget eliminates Head Start services for nearly 175,000 children. In total, the Republican budget would cut more than $1.1 trillion from education, health care, affordable housing, child care, transportation, and other programs that working families depend upon. So, the bad news is that if you are a low-income and working person, this is a terrible budget. But there is good news here, and I have to acknowledge that. If you are a billionaire or in the top 1%, you should immediately write to the Republican leadership and tell them how grateful you are for this budget, because it works very well for the people on top. If you are the Koch brothers, the third wealthiest family in America, worth over $100 billion, you will continue to receive a $1 billion tax break. And if you are another wealthy family, you will do very, very well. Let me conclude, Mr. Chairman, by saying the American people are not particularly happy with the work we do in Congress. They think this Congress works overtime for the rich and the powerful, and you know what? They're right. Maybe it's time to prepare a budget that works for working families, not just the 1%. Thank you.
I'm impressed at what you were able to read into my budget.
Accurate.
So there's a lot to say about that budget rebuttal. Bernie Sanders gave an incredibly comprehensive analysis of this budget plan, at least simply from the healthcare perspective. I think he generalized a little bit too much when it came to the people who were rich. At the very end there, you notice he just basically said, like, if you're, the Koch brothers that benefit, I think it was $1 billion tax break every year. And if you're anyone else that's rich in the top 1%, you're going to benefit from this plan. It was a little bit too gentle for me, but nonetheless, like, I'm critiquing something that's almost already perfect. Like, that was one of the best rebuttals I think I've ever seen to any budget. It was just so comprehensive. And you heard the chairman of the budget committee at the very end there, the Senate Budget Committee. The guy said, like, you really read into my plan. Like, he was caught off guard. He didn't expect, like, Bernie Sanders, who's running for president, going around state to state, rallying, just all of a sudden completely shred this budget to pieces. That was not expected at all. So really well done by Bernie Sanders. And I think this is exactly why we need to vote for Bernie Sanders. And I've gotten a lot of complaints about a recent video I did regarding Andrew Yang. I suggested that we should not vote for Andrew Yang, excuse me. And this is why, guys. This guy, Bernie Sanders, here, let me go to a better picture here. This guy literally fights for the American people, and we have proof of it. He fights for the American people, even though he's running for president. He could be doing a rally, providing, thousands of people, basically a giant ad of himself. But instead, he decided to go to a budget hearing and provide an incredibly boring analysis that a lot of Americans are probably not really going to watch, but that could have a great influence on Congress. And it provides people with a genuine understanding of who Bernie Sanders is. So I really appreciate this, and I think that this is why we need to vote for Bernie Sanders and not Andrew Yang. Now, that being said, I made a lot of responses to the comments that I got regarding the Andrew Yang video. Understand that I do want Andrew Yang on the debate stage. I want Tulsi Gabbard on the debate stage. I want all of the progressives on the debate stage. I think it would be incredibly beneficial to have multiple voices instead of just one, multiple voices suggesting we need things like, like the Green New Deal or, anything progressive in a sense. Whereas for the last, 20 years, 30 years, it's been consistently a bunch of establishment Democrats running up against establishment Republicans. We get no progressive ideas and no one learns anything watching those debates. So I think Bernie Sanders is the perfect candidate for president. I think he will win. I think that the pollings are skewed because they use 2016 voter models, and I did a video on that. I think from just looking at the Twitter community, looking at the Reddit community, looking at YouTube community, you can easily see that Bernie Sanders is the preferred candidate here. There's no question about it. And it's because of stuff like this, guys. It's 100% because he's genuine, he has a sense of integrity, and he's been doing this for years now, decades. Whereas you can't say the same thing about Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, even Tulsi Gabbard, even AOC, even Andrew Yang. All these people, they do not have the history that Bernie Sanders has. This was the first progressive since FDR. Honestly, this is the first real progressive since FDR.